Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Good afternoon. My name is John Leslie, and I am the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Communications and Chief Communications Officer here at CW Boulder. Additionally, this year I've been honored to serve as the Interim Director for the Conference on World Affairs, a CU and Boulder tradition like no other. This year marks the 76th convening of the conference, and while much has changed on campus and around the world, CWA's commitment to curiosity, engaging in meaningful conversation, and exploring the important issues of the day has remained a constant. As we kick off this year's conference, I want to begin by reading the CU Boulder Land Acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, and consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Thank you. Now, for those of you new to CWA, allow me to share a little bit about its structure. CWA is, as I mentioned, one of the longest running traditions we have in Boulder and on campus. CWA offers the unique opportunity for students, faculty, staff, and community members to come together as volunteers and develop meaningful programming that not only provides an opportunity for us to engage with each other, but also allows the chance for many individuals outside of CU Boulder to come to campus. And we're glad you're here. Over the years, CWA has welcomed countless leaders from the arts, business, politics, and numerous other fields, and this year is no exception. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to check out this year's full schedule and to take advantage of the great programming happening this week. We are thrilled to kick things off today with Scott Dikkers, who you will hear more about in a moment. We are also honored to close out the conference on Friday with a candid conversation on leadership with our very own Coach Prime, moderated by CU Boulder Center for Leadership Director and Leads Professor Dr. Stephanie Johnson, I hope to see you there. CWA could not succeed without the passion, leadership, and commitment of our staff and our amazing volunteers, sponsors, and supporters. Please join me in a round of applause to thank all those who have helped make this year's CWA happen. And now it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce our CWA Community and Student Programming Chairs, Yvette Lowney and Vara Riom.
On behalf of all of our community members, students, and staff, welcome to the 76th Conference on World Affairs. My name is Vara Riom, and I'm the Student Program Chair of this year's conference. It is truly a great pleasure and honor to be standing in front of you today. I attended my first Conference on World Affairs virtually in 2021 before I was officially a student at CU Boulder. I had just enrolled in CU after transitioning out of a 5-year career as a professional ballet dancer. I really had no idea what it was that I wanted to do with my life after ballet, but I knew that I wanted to get involved with CWA. I was so blown away by the caliber of speakers and the depth and breadth of the content. Plus, as an incoming political science student with my background, a conference that puts artists and foreign policy advisors together on panels seemed like a perfect fit. 3 years later, I never could have anticipated the impact that CWA would have on my life and the transformative experience that working on this conference has been. CWA exposed me to the ideas and the people that inspired my new career ambitions. It helped me clarify the issues that I want to work on and the impact that I want to have on the world. It gave me new insight into topics I knew little about and helped me find community here at CU. It's been an incredible privilege working with CWA at every level of the organization. And I'm so grateful to everyone who makes this conference possible. Thank you to our esteemed speakers for sharing their knowledge and insight with us, and to our sponsors and campus partners for their support. Thank you to our staff, who somehow managed to keep us all above water, and to all of our dedicated community volunteers who truly are the backbone of this conference. Thank you to all of our students who take the time out of their busy academic schedules to volunteer for CWA. Many are often surprised by how big of a role students play, but from choosing the speakers to shaping the conference content, the students' contributions are invaluable. Finally, thank you to each and every one of you in the audience for being here and for your engagement with CWA. This conference truly is for you, and we are so grateful for your support. I hope that you enjoy this year's CWA and wish you a stimulating and rewarding conference experience. I hope that you leave with new insight and inspiration to drive change in your communities. Whether it's your first time here or your 50th, I hope that you keep engaging with the conference so that we can continue to enlighten and inspire generations to come. With that, I'll hand it over to Yvette Lowney, my community program chair counterpart, whom I've had the pleasure of getting to know personally and professionally these past few years, and without whom this conference would not be possible.
Thank you, Diane. Well, gee, after that, I don't really know what to say. Thank you, Vara, for the introduction. As Vara said, my name's Yvette Lowney. I am the Community Program Chair, which means that I have had the privilege of working with Vara and dozens of students, dozens of community volunteers, and the wonderful staff who has supported the logistics on this effort to develop this program that's going to unfold over the next few days. And what I can tell you right now is that we've been working on this for a year, and we are so happy to see you here. This is free and open to the public, and until we stand here, we have no idea what's going to unfold. So, boy, are we happy to see you. We will be bringing out Scott in a couple of minutes, but before then, I've been asked to talk about a few logistical points. So, at this venue, we're going to be encouraging lots of questions. Scott's going to come out, he'll talk for about a half an hour, 30, 40 minutes. Then we'll have about 30 minutes for question and answers. So questions are really encouraged. We are inviting people to come up to a microphone, so there are microphones in the aisles. So just come up to the microphone, get in a queue. The students get to come to the front and ask their questions first. And we ask you that you keep your questions short so that we can get lots of questions up to Scott. If you are not comfortable coming to the microphone, we also have some people walking through with some cards and pencils. If you raise your hand, we will get a card to you and a pencil to you, and then we'll come pick that up, and then the students who will be manning the microphones will articulate those questions. So, did I miss anything, Martha? All right, we're good on logistics. The rest of my notes, I feel like I don't have to say very much because John and Vara did such a great job of introducing what I was going to say. So let me just talk a little bit about this particular keynote. In planning the Conference on World Affairs, we have a few traditions that have run through the full 76 years that we have been doing this. And one of them now is that we include programming that honors longtime CWA participant Molly Ivins. And so this keynote today is some of the programming that honors Molly. For those who don't know who Molly was or didn't have the pleasure of seeing her at CWA, she was a newspaper columnist and political commentator who I would say built her career and reputation, speaking truth to power and using her incredible wit to do it effectively. So her motto was raise hell, work hard, and have fun, which I think is an awesome motto for all of CWA. So it is no surprise, given how wonderful Molly was, that when we reached out to Scott Dikkers, he knew who she was. We started talking to him about, well, this is going to be honoring Molly Ivins, and he started telling me about who she was, which I loved. So let's pivot to Scott. So Scott is the founding editor of The Onion, which is another vehicle that has always tackled current events in a way that might make you laugh or make you think about things differently. So at The Onion, Scott was the longest running editor-in-chief. He had an involvement there that has spanned over 3 decades. He teaches, he writes books, some of which will be available at the UMC this week. He hosts podcasts, he directs films, he enjoys speaking in front of a live audience, unlike me. And so with no further ado, we would like to offer Scott the Molly Ivins Tribute Award and invite him out to speak to all of us. This is for you.
Thank you.
We will hand it off here. Thanks.
Oh, photo opportunity. Shake hands. Yeah, like this, and then like this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, beautiful, thank you. Hi, everybody. Hello. It's so great to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you. It's so great to be here in Boulder. Long time ago, I was hanging out in a college dorm room with a bunch of other goofballs, and we managed to start up a little publication that has somehow become the world's most trusted news source. Talking about The Onion. Curious to know, show of hands, anybody here ever been tricked by an Onion story that you thought was, oh my God, too many hands, this is sad. And I will admit, it happens to me too. How can you tell? And the reverse is also true, where sometimes you see a headline in a real news source and it sounds like The Onion. And I'm steeped in this stuff, and even I can't tell sometimes. And when I see a good one, I write it down. I wanted to share a few with you that I've seen recently. Real headlines in real newspapers. Cat comes in 3rd in Virginia Senate race. Did you see that story? Anyone in the university, if you're a professor, you'll enjoy this one. Ever-growing past confounds history professors. And I got to give you one more. Human butt seized by terror police. Real headlines. So, how did this happen? How did the real news start sounding as crazy as The Onion? And how does The Onion end up in our news feeds like it's some kind of legitimate news source? You know, Onion writers didn't have any journalistic training, we were just making stuff up. Well, we've lost faith in our traditional media. We know it's all nothing but corporate propaganda. Truth has no meaning. So we're all siloed in our little social media bubbles of misinformation and alternative facts. We don't believe in anything anymore. We don't believe in our cherished institutions. We don't believe in our elected leaders, certainly. And we don't believe in science. Now, this is a terrible, terrible situation, of course. But from another perspective, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's good. And I'm going to spend my time with you here tonight trying to convince you that it's a good thing. And it's going to be a stretch, I'll be honest with you. But I'm going for it. Going for it. When you can't trust anything, why not put your trust in the one news source that you know can't be trusted? In a post-truth world, the only news that makes sense is the fake news, the fake news. I have to do my Trump impression sideways to get the full effect. The fake news, the fake news. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So here's how all this craziness began. It was 1988. Ronald Reagan was president. The biggest threat in the world of journalism was USA Today. This was a newspaper that, unlike all the other newspapers, was in color. You couldn't do color. That wasn't permitted. Newspapers were black and white. And they didn't have longer stories. They had short little nuggets. They had a lot of pictures. You could cut out all the pictures of a USA Today, and it would just be this frame that had no copy in it. And that was the state of journalism. And so, a couple of those goofballs I mentioned earlier, Tim Keck and Chris Johnson, thought, well, we should do a college humor publication here in Madison, Wisconsin, and make fun of USA Today. It'll be a good opportunity to tear down this horrible thing that's happening in journalism. And they roped me into that, and I helped them. Now, just to give you a little peek into the future of how far the pendulum has swung, today, USA Today is one of our finest newspapers. Everybody else looks like USA Today. Everybody else is doing nuggets. People are firing investigative reporters left and right. They win the Pulitzer almost every year. So, just to give you a little peek into how bad things have gotten. Back then, it was a terror. USA Today was a terror. So, my thought when I first spoke to Tim and Chris about this exciting project, now I'm in the comedy business and I do a comic strip that's a big hit in Madison. That's why they want me involved. I thought, well, this would be great. This is a humor magazine, like Mad or National Lampoon. But no, it turns out they went to the printer and asked the printer, well, how much would it cost to print a magazine, a humor magazine with a full color front page? Now, these guys didn't have penny one. Nobody's investing money in this. There's no, seed capital. It's just these two guys in a dorm room. And the printer said, I forget, it was like $2,000 and some per issue. And they said, okay, well, what's the cheapest kind of paper we could possibly print on? And they said, well, newsprint. You got the cheap newsprint. And the cheapest newsprint is like gray. It's like a hideous newsprint. It's not even the good, like beige-ish newsprint. Maybe $400 per issue. So Tim and Chris were like, all right, I guess we're doing a newspaper. And when I heard this, my heart sank. Like, who'd ever heard of a humor newspaper before? That wasn't a thing. I was like, all right, fine, whatever we can do. And so I drew cartoons for them. That's where I came from, was cartooning, and I let them do everything else. They founded it, they started it up, and they literally did everything. They wrote most of the copy, they sold the ads, they delivered it when it came out Tuesday morning at the crack of dawn. And when the first issue hit the streets, I saw it, and at that point, I was doing my cartoon. I did 3 different cartoons for them with different drawing styles and under assumed names, so it wouldn't look like this one guy who could draw was doing all the cartoons, like a bad high school yearbook. And when I saw that first issue, I was glad that I had put fake names on all the cartoons. But I figured, well, they'll get their bearings, everything is going to be okay. Week later, second issue comes out. It's worse. It's riddled with typos. It doesn't really seem that great. So at this point, to save my cartooning career, I was making $60 a week from The Onion drawing these 3 cartoons. I was the highest paid Onion employee. Tim and Chris weren't getting paid anything. All the money went into the printing. I showed up at they had moved to an off-campus flat, moved to their little flat. I visited them there and volunteered to pitch in to help, see if there's anything I could do. So I helped edit some stories and do some other things. And they told me that they had a plan for issue 3. And that was they were going to take a photo of the 2 of them mooning the camera, run it on the front page with a big banner headline, "Screw you, readers, we quit." Because they had not slept for 3 weeks. It was really making them crazy. Now, I don't know if this is true. I told Tim this recently, and he said he didn't remember that. But it really affected me when they said that, because no, don't do that. Let's do something else. And we ended up doing something else. Tim's naked ass did appear on the cover of issue 3, but it was for a totally different story. It had nothing to do with them quitting or leaving. I think he just wanted to appear naked on the cover of his own newspaper. And how can you fault someone for that? So I continued to help them. And then a few months later, about an academic year, they decided that they really had had enough and they were done. And so they offered to sell me The Onion. So it was a year old, and they sold it to me, and I had a business partner, a guy named Pete, who knew how to sell ads. He had sold some ads for them. But I was going to be in charge of the content. So I was going to be owner, editor-in-chief. And I jumped right in. I bought it. And basically collected every penny I had, which was $3,000, to buy this 1-year-old Madison, Wisconsin newspaper that had a circulation of about 15,000. My friends told me I was crazy. They said, start your own newspaper. I'm like, no. Do you see what Tim and Chris went through? You can't start a newspaper. You have to buy one. So anyway, now I'm owner, editor-in-chief of this newspaper, The Onion, which nobody's ever heard of. Occasionally you might, see people pick it up on campus. That was kind of it. And I was faced with this horrible job of filling sometimes 8 tabloid broadsheets per week with stories and cartoons and jokes. On occasion, it would be a 12-page issue. This is like death. So I could see why Tim and Chris weren't sleeping. So I needed to hire some writers and immediately started collecting people. Now, people have often asked me, where does The Onion find its writers? Because, these are some of the top writers of satire in the entire business. And other companies and other industries, they're very concerned about, how do I find the A players in my industry? How do I find the top people? And, we just figured it out. They search high and low. They have business seminars about this stuff. So I'll tell you our simple formula. We did not search high and low. We just searched low. Dropouts, shut-ins, disaffected, smart-alecky liquor store clerks, grocery store clerks who make fun of customers in line, minimum wage slaves, service workers. These were our A players. Now, why is that? Well, they were bitter, they were hateful, and they had no prospects in life. Perfect. And I was right there with them. I was one of them. I had a day job as well. Worked at a radio station, pressing buttons at the top of the hour. So what you find when you find people who are really good at writing comedy is that it comes from some kind of deep pain. I'm sure you've all heard this, and you've seen it, like, Chris Farley, John Belushi, Robin Williams. These are a good indication of who comedy people really are. There's an old saying in Hollywood, don't ever invite a comedy writer to your party, because they just bring it right down. So, but these are my people. I love them. I love all of them. They were, oh my God, I hired an agoraphobic conspiracy nut, a pathological liar. One of our writers was suicidal. They were all on some sort of prescription antidepressant medication. They all came from broken homes. And, often you turn to comedy as a way to cope. Like your dad leaves and you subconsciously become a funny person in order to, win him back, which is so sad because dads don't come back. It's not happening. I don't care how funny you are, dad's not coming back. One writer originally approached me by email, and the subject heading was, "Area Loser Wants Job." I thought, okay, pretty funny. Opened it up, and he had a pretty good submission of headlines there, so I called him up. Turns out he's pushing 30, still lived in his mother's basement, too insecure to leave the house for like 10 years. And I'm thinking just the kind of talent we're looking for at The Onion. So I hire that guy. Another writer I hired was a guy named Rich. Rich was trying to figure out what to do with his life. He got a job as a school bus driver. Now, you have to understand, in these days, there was no internet photo service where you could get great photos of anything. If you wanted a photo of a person, you had to go out on the street and say, hey, you want to be in The Onion? And people would be like, oh, sure. That's how we got most of our people. But some of the funniest people to put in The Onion for stories are old people and kids. They're just funnier. They're funny. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because they don't have any sense of comedy about themselves. They take everything very seriously. It was impossible to get photos of kids. Here's a guy who drives a school bus. He's got access to so many kids. Now, you can't go out on the street and see a kid, hey, can I take your picture? This is not going to work. You're going to get arrested. The parents will shoot you, whatever. Rich had this plug-in. And so we would do it legitimately. We'd find a kid on the bus, and Rich would say, yeah, he'd be perfect for this story. We'd contact the parents through the school, and they'd sign a release form. Everything was very by the book. And we do that for regular people on the street too. They'd sign a blanket release. By the way, if anyone ever approaches you from The Onion, do not sign the release and do not let them take your picture. You'll end up being, area masturbator, local pedophile. You do not want that, okay? Just don't do it. But for the kids, we're going to be good to the kids. And so a lot of times in those early months and years of The Onion, it would just be me and Rich staying up all night, drinking Cokes and eating pizzas, trying to make ourselves laugh, trying to make each issue of The Onion funnier than the last. And nobody was making any money. The basic business model was the same as with Tim and Chris. You cover the printing costs, and if there's anything left over, it's a win. And I noticed a lot of our advertisers at that time paid in cash, which I thought was very strange. Pete would come out, he'd go, hey, we got some money this week, and he'd give you like $20, for the week. Found out much later that one of our main advertisers had been indicted for laundering cocaine money. Another writer I want to tell you about, early writer we hired named Carol, a pure delight. Carol, I discovered through her street art. She would do these amazing little stunts around campus that you couldn't help but notice. And one of them was when she would go on vacation, she would travel, she would steal a roll of toilet paper from the restroom of wherever she went, and she would label where it came from, and she would display it in her apartment. And somehow, and I'm talking about Graceland, Wall Drug, whatever, just kind of like, wherever places. Somehow she got listed in an international museum directory and called her apartment the Madison Museum of Bathroom Tissue. So what would happen was people would travel all over the world and steal toilet paper and write where it came from and mail it to her. Pretty soon, all of her walls were lined with toilet paper from all over the world. She had the Great Wall of China, she had the Louvre, she had the White House. Now, the White House toilet paper was encased in a special glass box so nobody could, defile it. And I saw her giving a tour of the toilet paper museum on the nightly news one night. I was like, who is this? But here was the clincher. Here was something she did, this very disturbing little stunt she pulled. Very disturbing. She dug a hole in the grassy median in front of her apartment, maybe about this wide, about this deep, and put a little placard there that said, "Who took our baby?" So when you're walking down the street there, this is like an old-fashioned magnetic headline that makes you want to read what's going on. This is why Carol is such a brilliant writer. There's copy underneath that headline, and it explains that their precious newborn infant had died, they buried her here in the grassy medium, and some monster had dug her up. Please bring her back to us. So, with writers like these, you can imagine that the Onion started to get into a little bit of trouble for some of the things that we were printing. Happened a lot. One of the first areas where we got in some serious trouble was with the governor of Wisconsin. I was planning a big front page story, Governor proclaims November Masturbation Month. And I needed a photo of the governor for the story. I already explained to you how difficult it was to get photos back in the day. So I called his office, and I figured I'd get the standard politician mugshot, in front of the flag or whatever. And that's what I got. And I call and I talk to his press secretary, a guy by the name of John Hankus. And he says, "The Onion, huh? I've seen you around." "No, I'm not going to give you a photo. You're just going to make fun of him." I'm like, "Yes, but aren't I entitled to that photo?" He refused to give me the photo. I went to the local daily newspaper, the Wisconsin State Journal. They had a whole file of photos, beautiful photos of the governor. They had him at a podium going like this, perfect for this masturbation story. And they let me use it. They just said, just don't give us credit. So I'm laying out this story, and I decide, just for kicks, a little writing on the side of the photo, "Special thanks to John Hankus." Now, when that issue hit the streets, I got a really angry phone call from John Hankus. The comic farce that took place in the governor's mansion, I wish I could have seen it. The guy got his head chewed off. "What are you doing giving these kids a photo?" "I didn't give a photo." He got in so much trouble, he was furious. He demanded a retraction, said he was going to sue us out of existence. And he did, in fact. His office prevented us from getting a major advertiser for many years. They worked really hard to ruin the Onion. But we decided, okay, we'll give him a retraction. Yeah. Next issue of The Onion on the inside front page, little box. Last week, The Onion erroneously reported that the governor had proclaimed November Masturbation Month. It was a reporter's mistake. He had actually proclaimed it Sodomy Month. The Onion regrets the error. Special thanks to John Hankus for pointing out this correction. I wish I could say that our troubles ended there. Just the beginning. Just the beginning. We got a knock on our door a little while later from a very serious-looking attorney in a suit and graying temples, just like from Central Casting. And he said, "I understand that you've reproduced a photograph of my client, Ginger Rogers, without her express written permission. And I'm here to find evidence of that infringement and use it in a court of law when I sue you out of existence." We heard that phrase a lot. So he barges in, he starts rifling through our back issue pile. And meanwhile, I'm terrified. My knees are shaking because I'm pretty sure that we ran a photo of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing. We ran it in the worst possible way. We ran it in an ad we had made for a local hamburger place. You can't do that. Anytime you use a celebrity's photo in an ad, it implies endorsement, and you lose that case. It's open shut. Well, he gets up from the back issue pile and says, "I had it on good authority you'd run that photo, but I can't find it. And you know what? I'm glad, because I think what you kids are doing is hilarious." Oh, that thing with the governor was a hoot. And he starts listing his favorite Onion headlines. He's like a fan. And I don't know if it was out of guilt or opportunism. That attorney, Ken Artis was his name. If you ever need a good attorney, look him up. Ken Artis, Black River Falls, Wisconsin. He decided to be the Onion's pro bono legal counsel. From that day forward, every week, like clockwork, he would come in and he'd read the entire issue. He'd laugh and laugh and laugh, and he'd let us know if there was anything actionable. And, this is much more important, if anyone ever came after us, tried to sue us out of existence like he did, he would make it go away. He was magic. The Onion would not exist without Ken Artis. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So, Taco Bell wanted to sue us at one point. They didn't like our front page story. Taco Bell introduces new morning after burrito. This particular food item was called the contraceptive melt. And if consumed within 24 hours of intercourse, it would terminate an unwanted pregnancy. It was a great story. I don't know why the other media wasn't covering this. But Taco Bell people were pissed, and they called, and Ken just made them go away. Just made it go away. Amazing. Happened again. We did a big story about how a dying 13-year-old was going to get his wish. He was going to get to pork a famous female pop singer whose name I'm not allowed to disclose because of a non-disclosure agreement that I signed. And we got a call from this very famous female pop singer's highfalutin Beverly Hills attorney telling us, hey, I know you're a satirical publication, my client's a public figure, you have every right to make fun of her. However, she is very rich and may just want to sue you out of existence for fun. So Ken just happened to be there reading the paper when this guy called, so I hand the phone to Ken. Inside of 10, 15 minutes, these two attorneys are laughing, sharing stories of their childhoods. Ken sells the guy a subscription to The Onion. And we never hear from him again. Now, I got some insight into how Ken worked his magic when The Onion did a parody of a fine dining issue. It was just like a, crass attempt to get restaurants to advertise with us. It was like fake recipes, fake restaurant reviews, stuff like that. Well, a couple of us had visited a local butcher, and the guy started talking to us and telling us all the local restaurants that bought his grade D and grade C meat. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. Let's run this on the front page with his picture, which we did. Now, when that issue hit the streets, we got a very angry phone call from this guy. And this seemed different. This seemed like, oh my God, we're tearing down this small business. This is not somebody who, and he was just traumatized. He was like, well, these are my customers. You're going to ruin me. So I asked Ken, what should we do? And Ken is cool as a cucumber. He says, well, let me have $300 cash. I'll take care of it by the end of the week. All right. Plenty of cocaine money lying around. I gave Ken $300 cash. Here's what he does. He goes to the butcher when that guy's working there, and he says, I saw you in The Onion. And the guy's like, oh yeah, those kids are going to pay for that. And Ken said, when I saw that, I thought, now there's a butcher who tells it like it is. There's a butcher I can trust. Let me have some prime rib and some veal. And he proceeds to order $300 worth of meat off the menu. We never hear from the guy again. Meanwhile, Ken eats like a king for weeks. Now, despite some of these mishaps, some of this trouble that we got into, The Onion grows during this time. In fact, we get a lot of friendly puff pieces written about us. Often when one of these crazy things happen, people find it very funny and entertaining, so they write about it, and The Onion's circulation is growing. Our advertising revenue is increasing. Meanwhile, in the rest of the world of the print media and journalism, newspapers are dying. They're losing ad revenue, and their readership is aging. So, also at this time, the fairness doctrine is repealed. So the FCC decided, we don't need balance in media anymore. You can have infotainment. You can have blatantly editorialized news. News organizations, especially on TV, no longer had to provide news as a public service. They were now competing with their entertainment programming. So news had a budget, and it had to get viewers, and it had to be more sensationalized. And all this was like happening at the same time. So as The Onion was getting more popular, these other news, like TV and newspaper news sources were looking at The Onion saying, maybe we should make a few stories. Maybe we should make some funny headlines. I don't know. Let's see what happens. And I started seeing that happening. That's when I started seeing certain publications start to be a little, sillier, tap into the satiric, do a little more like feature stuff, start firing some investigative reports aren't funny. Nobody's reading that. Nobody cares. So I didn't really realize what was happening at the time. And The Onion just kept doing what we were doing. In fact, we doubled down. And around about the mid-2000s, we decided, thank you. We decided that the bandwidth was at a certain point where we could start putting video online. This is what other news organizations were doing also. Fox News, CNN, they were putting these little 3-minute clips of their 24-hour news channels online. And you could sit there and painstakingly wait while the old-time modem drew the first frame of the movie. And we wanted in on that. We wanted to get in on the ground floor. And we knew that what was working with The Onion was when we made the satire and the parody look as much like the real thing as possible. When people believed what we were doing, it just made it so much more fun for the rest of us. They would realize right away that okay, it's fake, it's The Onion, and they would get the joke. But one example, an early story that people believed and caused kind of a stir was this headline, "A Chinese woman gives birth to septuplets, has 1 week to choose." Yeah, in accordance with Chinese law, 6 of the 7 babies would have to be thrown off a mountaintop. And that caused a really big stir. There were like websites put up and prayer groups started for these babies and everything. But it would hardly ever happen. It was once in a rare while. And then as soon as they realized what had happened, they were like, oh, okay, it's made up. Well, when we started doing video, something strange happened. It was like a paradigm shift. Because up to that point, The Onion's audience had been people who read, people who understand words. Once you start doing video, you get a whole different demographic of people who do not read. They only look at bright, moving, colorful pictures. And they're not the brightest bunch. So one of the first videos we produced was a parody of a network morning news show, or like a morning, features show. It's called Today Now. Today Now, wonderful. Great show. One of the early videos that we did was a clip, and we would do these clips, We would pretend like The Onion had all these 24-hour news channels, and we were just showing clips. But of course, we were just making the clip. There was no 24-hour news channel. And in fact, these clips were so expensive to make because, we wanted them to look like real clips from real shows. So we would spend like $25,000 on a single clip, and we'd be lucky in those days to make $500 selling ads for it. It was a total money siphon, and we invested $2 million into these videos. Totally worth it, by the way. Totally worth it. So the video was a little piece about how a kid was bankrupting the Make-A-Wish Foundation because he had wished for unlimited wishes. And on the show, we showed this kid, his shaven head, in his hospital room surrounded by expensive toys and celebrities and stuff like this. And on the show, there was a lawyer from the Make-A-Wish, an actor we hired, pretending to be a lawyer from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, saying, a promise made is a promise kept. The kid wants a battleship. He wants a F-18 fighter jet. You know, we hired a crack legal team to try to get out of the deal somehow. The kid wished away our legal team. I got a panicked phone call from the head of the Make-A-Wish Foundation telling me that their funders were calling them saying, "What's going on? Are you going out of business? We heard you were going under." He had to put a message on the front page of the Make-A-Wish Foundation website explaining that, no, if you've seen this, it's the Onion, it's fake. He wanted us to take the video down. I was like, we can't take the video down. So we donated money to them, and he managed to convince people eventually that it was all fake. This kept happening. It happened frequently with the nation of China. Now, I don't know if it's some sort of like lost in translation thing or what, but there were a couple of instances where the Chinese government and the Chinese press should have known better. One of them was when we ran a big front page story about how the US Congress was threatening to leave Washington if the city didn't build them a new Capitol building with a stadium, you know, seating and like a retractable dome with hot dog stands around and everything. They'd move somewhere that treated them better, like Oklahoma City or something. And for this story, we drew this elaborate graphic depiction of the proposed, you know, stadium-sized Capitol with all the stands and the hot dog vendors in Adobe Illustrator. It looked beautiful. The largest circulation newspaper at that time, the Beijing Evening News, reran that story verbatim with the image. Unbelievable. And it happened again. The Onion named Korean dictator Kim Jong-un the world's sexiest man alive. The official Chinese news agency reran that story verbatim. They used all our photos. They even added some of their own photos of the sexy dictator to augment the coverage. Now, when they realize they're punked, most people, like I said, they're like, "Oh, okay, I get it." Not the people of China. In the Beijing Evening News, they ran a little correction on the inside cover of the issue following that issue, because somebody had told them, "No, this is all fake. You can't run this." So they ran a little correction, and it said, "Apparently, there are newspapers in America that print lies." Now, by that point, most people have heard of The Onion. All of these little instances, some of the good press that we've gotten, The Onion is like nearly a household name. We had the 9/11 issue, really put us on the map. We had a best-selling book. So most people get it. Most people, you know, maybe they're tricked for a second if they see the headline in the news feed, but then they're like, "Oh, okay, it's The Onion." There were 4 people who held out, who still didn't understand what The Onion was and didn't like being made fun of in The Onion. And only 2 of them were US presidents. First one was movie director Michael Bay. All right. So Michael Bay didn't like a story that we ran. It was one of our editorials on the inside of the paper that was written by Michael Bay. And we would have people write editorials all the time, and they were, you know, we'd write them, just put his name and picture on them. People don't like that. And Michael Bay especially didn't like it. But what the editorial was a screed, he was furious that the year the March of the Penguins came out, it won the Oscar and he didn't. And he was furious at all those goddamn penguins. He demanded that we pull that story. Okay. Number 2, Steven Seagal. Actor Steven Seagal. Now here's the crazy thing. So we made fun of Steven Seagal, he got upset, and it was a typical situation. Ken Artist calls his people, and the people are like, "Oh, okay, it's supposed to be funny. Oh, okay, never mind." Then The Onion makes this ill-fated Onion movie, the mid-2000s. Steven Seagal is in the Steven Seagal is in the movie. I don't know if he forgot or what happened. He's taking the job. I don't know what it was. Some people, you can't make any sense of them. All right. Number 3, George W. Bush. So we started doing a parody of George W. Bush's weekly radio address. This is a thing that presidents used to do, started with FDR. Every Saturday morning, they'd do a little radio address. They would just tell the people of the nation how things were going or whatever. And I decided to start doing a parody of it because every week, it seemed, George W. Bush would do something really stupid that you'd have to make fun of. And there just wasn't enough room in the paper or on the website to do it all. So I started doing this parody weekly radio address. And I was taking a little hiatus from The Onion when I started this. It was like a side project. Then I came back to The Onion, and the new owners at that point decided, hey, we should run that weekly radio address in The Onion, like a public service. And so we designed this beautiful page for it. It had the presidential seal there. We got a cease and desist order from the George W. Bush White House Affairs Office. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, but this is right about the time when Harriet Miers, who was one of Bush's attorneys in the White House Current Affairs or White House Legal Affairs Office, was put up for a Supreme Court spot. And everybody thought, she's a clerk. She can't be a Supreme Court justice. And so we took advantage of this opportunity. We told the New York Times about it. They wrote this huge arts piece about it. It was beautiful. Like, thank you, George W. Bush. I was in the process of pitching a book adaptation of the podcast. The offers shot through the roof. There was a bidding war. It was like the most beautiful thing in the world. Now, George W. Bush, maybe he's come around by then. Maybe he, understands what The Onion is. Any of you seen his paintings? Those paintings he does? There's something not right about those paintings. There's something wrong with that guy. Like, it's in the eyes. There's something off. There's something off. I think he might be trying to, capture the souls of, people he tortured or people that got killed in Iraq by mistake. Bombed the wrong country. I didn't know what I was doing. There's something going on there. Take a look next time you see one of those paintings. You all know who the last person is on the list, don't you? Yes. So, back in the 1980s, there was a humor publication called Spy Magazine. You remember Spy Magazine? Great magazine. Hilarious, fantastic. They made fun of Donald Trump in almost every issue. It was basically, they focused on high society Manhattan culture, and Donald Trump was trying to be in that. So he was a frequent target. And they coined the term short-fingered vulgarian for Donald Trump. He hated it. So what he would do is whenever he found a photo of himself, he would photocopy it and he would circle the fingers and he would fax it to Kurt Anderson and Graydon Carter, the two guys who were running Spy Magazine. And he would say, see, not small. And so we knew about this at The Onion. This is like part of, literary comedy history. And so we decided, well, when he was coming out against Obama's birth certificate, it was like 2012, 2013, somewhere in there, we decided, let's go after him. Let's go after more than just the fingers. Okay. So, we had this front page story. Donald Trump looks in the mirror at sagging, aging, flaccid penis. And we got a furious phone call from his attorney, Michael Cohen, demanding a retraction. They wrote us a cease and desist letter. Now, we don't cease and desist. Somebody calls and ceases and desists. We just have Ken call them and we just keep doing our thing. And in fact, many of our cease and desist letters are framed in the Onion office to this day. We're proud of them. So when we didn't make any changes, they kept calling. Michael Cohen kept calling. And then we kept getting letters. They were hounding us. Now, at the time, it's kind of funny and everything. But then when he started running for president, remember that story that broke where it turned out that Donald Trump had called People magazine pretending to be his own publicist. Do you remember this story? There's audio of it you can find on the internet. He just disguises his voice and oh yeah, all the ladies like to have sex with Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump. He's still the hot thing, absolutely. And he named himself John Barron and all this stuff. I got to thinking, I'm like, I don't know if that was Michael Cohen calling the Onion. I think that might have been Trump himself. Because I have the letter. I have the letter he sent. Some of the verbiage in the letter is just like a little bit too Trumpy. Let me begin by stating the obvious. The commentary was not written by Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is an important businessman. The article is absolutely disgusting. Okay, it goes on like that. Does that sound like an attorney? Does that sound like how Donald Trump? So there's no like ending or punchline to the story except that man became the president of the United States. And he may again. Yeah. Yeah. So what do we make of all this? What do we make of all this insanity? Well, I said it earlier that I think maybe it's a good thing. Now, why would I say such a crazy thing? You know, we've got the Onion in our news feeds, and nobody believes anybody or trusts anything anymore. There's no grown-ups in charge. There's no authoritative anything. Well, I think especially when it comes to the media, all of this insanity should really form like this giant laser beam that shoots right into our minds a very important message. Very important message that we all need to take stock in. It's a message that can make us more educated citizens. It's a message that can make us more informed voters. It can make us better at thinking critically. And that message is simple. It's, don't believe everything you read. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. I would be delighted to entertain any questions that any of you have. If you want to. Oh, two people talking at once. Oh, yeah. What's that? We're going to go to the microphones. Happy to entertain some questions. Thank you all for coming, by the way. This is a lot of fun. Great to be here. Hello. I can barely see, but that's okay.
Hi, my name's Chance. I had a two-part question. First, what's your favorite piece of media that you put out? And second, what is a story that didn't go out that you think of?
That I think of?
That stands out to you.
Stands out to me. There weren't too many stories. Well, it's kind of a boring answer because a lot of the stories that didn't go out because they just weren't that funny. So anything that we thought was really funny, we'd put it out. And then what was your first question again?
Favorite piece of media.
Oh, what's my favorite piece of media that I put out? I would have to say, oh my God, there's a lot. It's like having kids, you know, you don't want to pick favorites. Because what if the other kids are here that you pick the favorite? But I would have to say that it was The Onion's first original book, Our Dumb Century. Very proud of that book. We worked really hard on it. Had just an amazing team of geniuses putting that together. It's a history of the 20th century through fake front pages of The Onion, and I recommend it. Thank you very much for the question. Oh yeah, and then we go to this side. That makes good sense to switch. Yes, hello.
Would you be so kind as to take a photo in my hat?
To take a photo what?
Of you in my hat. It relates to your comments.
I'll take a photo of you in your hat. Can we wait until all the questions are done? Oh, you want me to wear the hat? What does the hat say? Am I endorsing anything? Oh, it's a Chinese hat. Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you. A beautiful hat. Is that a genuine Mao Zedong era hat? Amazon. Yeah. Probably made by the same people who make the Trump hats. Hello.
Hi, my name is Tanvir. I'm a student at CWA Boulder. My question is, do you see or foresee perhaps AI or ML type of things will kill or revive the satire in modern world?
Good question.
Thank you.
Will AI kill or help satire in the modern world? So I believe that comedy especially, satire in particular, is a form of person-to-person communication. People who want comedy want to hear another person's perspective. If they know it was AI generated, it gives them the creeps. They don't like it. I don't care how good it is. Nobody's interested in that. Does that mean AI can't be part of the process, part of the brainstorming? All the AI ideas are terrible, by the way, but they can be part of the brainstorming. Sometimes professional writers show up at meetings with terrible ideas. Happens to all of us. So I think it's a fine tool, but I don't see it ever replacing quality comedy, put it that way. Do y'all see that George Carlin special that they made? Fake AI George Carlin special? Kelly Carlin, George Carlin's daughter, sued, got him to take it down off of YouTube, and they claimed that it was all AI generated, but it turns out one of the guys, who's like an experienced writer, wrote the whole bit, modeled after George Carlin. So it wasn't even AI. So a lot of people saw that and got scared. They were like, this is a pretty good George Carlin special. I don't know what's going on. Oh, and now we're on this side. Yes, hello.
Hi, so we have Jon Stewart, John Oliver, Samantha Bee, Jordan Klepper. Why does left-leaning satire seem to be successful and popular while right-leaning satire seems to fall flat?
Yeah, why is left-leaning satire more successful than right-leaning satire? It comes down to this basic theorem of doing satire, even comedy in general to some extent, and that is you need to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So audiences like when you make fun of authority figures, power structures, so on and so forth. They don't like when you make fun of the downtrodden, victims, stuff like that. And the so-called left-leaning, Jon Stewart, John Oliver, et cetera, they seem to be representing like the democratic side of things, but really what they're not looking at it in terms of left and right politically. The best satirists see it as haves and have-nots. And because that's a much better playing field. Those are better odds for a comedy person because the haves are like 1%. The not-haves are 99%. So if you're appealing to the 99%, you're going to get laughs. It's just science. So why doesn't right-wing comedy work? Well, the right wing, the Republican Party, represent the rich. We all know that. They've always represented the rich. Now, there's definitely some, establishment Democratic politicians who represent the rich, and they're all corrupt. I mean, who are we kidding? They're all on the take, and they do the bidding of their corporate masters. They don't do anything that we want them to do. But that's where the power lies. We are the 99%. So you can make fun of politicians, you can make fun of Congress, you can make fun of the media, which is all owned by those same corporations, so they can't ever point out the problem. But if you go out there and you try to do satire that glorifies the 1% and makes fun of, the downtrodden victims like immigrants, women, gay, LGBTQ community, nobody's going to like that. It's not going to work. They try it, they do it on Fox News, and those shows don't usually last long. Greg Gutfeld's show is the longest lasting show, and I figured out the secret. They don't have a studio audience. They have like 5 or 6 friends that they bring in to laugh at their jokes. That's what you get. So that's my very real serious answer to that really interesting question. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. I have been closely following your work for decades.
Well, thank you, sir.
And I realized how successful it was when, I think it was sometime after 2001, my father said, "Did you see that headline? Our country has never been stronger," said spokesman of the Quadrigon.
That headline never ran.
Well, maybe he should have worked for you.
Well, but here's the thing. So Tim Harrod, the writer I told you about who lived in his mother's basement, he wrote that headline. And it was something like America Still Strong, Say Quadragon Officials, or something like that. And I was taking a hiatus when they did the 9/11 issue, but I know that they pulled that story because it seemed like it was making fun of the victims too much. It wasn't really tearing down the powerful. It's still pretty funny, and it's like a nice footnote. Yeah, so what that means is either your father came up with the same idea, or he's such an Onion fan that he saw like interviews with the writers about it, and that's where he got that.
That must have been what it was. Now my question though is, who is carrying the flame? Who is doing it now? Who would you look to think, okay, there's a generation of satire that has that quality? I'm thinking of like Some More News on YouTube. Is very cutting and awesome, but you would know.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I always keep my eye out. A lot of these shows, like I think John Oliver's show is really on the cutting edge, and they hire, kids in their 20s to write that show. So in many ways, that's where they're going. Every generation has its kind of humor style that it likes, and the humor style of Gen Z and Gen Alpha is largely madcap, non sequitur humor. And so things like Eric Andre, the Tim and Eric Awesome Show, these are the kind of things that they're into. To them, like satire, like doing news parody, is kind of old school, So we're gonna see some exciting new format that they create where they're able to do really intelligent and fun satire, and it's not gonna be what we expect, and that's great. I love that. Yes?
Online subscription available?
One more time?
Online subscription available?
They used to be, but around about 2012, The Onion stopped printing paper versions of The Onion. So you can't get a subscription anymore. You can go on the website for free and read it all you want, though.
And I can't charge a bill for my advertising.
You can't what?
That way I can't charge a bill for my advertising now.
I'm sure we can figure out a way to bill you. Don't worry about it. Yes?
Well, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Very enjoyable program. I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite comedian, and why that comedian?
I have a lot of favorite comedians. I am a big fan of all the famous ones that you know about. My two favorites right now are Maria Bamford. Anybody know Maria Bamford? Just so unique and so funny and just so original. And she was going to be on tour in my area. I'm in the Minneapolis area, and had to cancel some shows. She got ill, so I'm very concerned for her right now. And my other favorite is Nick Griffin. He's been doing comedy for like 30 years, just a master, so funny. Not that great at social media. So you don't really see his stuff, He gets on the late night shows once in a while. He has a couple of albums. But yeah, look up Nick Griffin. He's just so good. Big fan. Thank you, sir. Hello.
Hi. I was wondering, there's been some speculation that certain SNL parodies have actually affected people's perceptions of real people and politicians like Sarah Palin. Do you think that any Onion content has affected people's perceptions of people in real life?
I do. I boldly profess that I think they have. So I spent a lot of time pointing out the foibles of two Republican presidents. There aren't too many stories to tell about recent Democratic presidents. In The Onion, we've been making fun of Joe Biden since he was vice president, and we created this kind of character for him. And the character is like this Rust Belt dirtbag who washes his Trans Am shirtless in front of the White House, stuff like that. And he's just like this kind of creepy uncle. It's got all these like creepy stories or whatever. And we actually produced a fake autobiography of Joe Biden called The President of Vice. Around about 2013, 2014, something like that. And, you know, it was a full book, and we got a guy who sounded like Biden to do the whole audiobook and everything. Joe Biden himself tweeted about it. Say, check out my autobiography. He likes that. He likes being like, you know, regular old Joe from Pennsylvania or whatever. So I think that reputation like enhanced him in his mind. Oh, and sorry, one more thing about the tweet. Obama retweeted the tweet. Pretty nice, pretty nice. Oh, and you know, The Onion's been around 35 years at this point. So we go back, you know. Like I said, Ronald Reagan was president when we started. There is a Bill Clinton story. There's a Bill Clinton story. The Onion was just in Madison, Wisconsin when Clinton ran in 92. When did it start in Boulder? I feel like that was around the same time, 91, 92. Boulder was a very early place for the Onion print edition. Earlier, couldn't have been earlier than 91. Maybe you're right. Anyway, Bill Clinton came to Madison to give a speech, and we really wanted a photo of Bill Clinton holding up the Onion, like do anything for it. How are you going to get to him? Like, you know, how are you going to pierce through the crowd and get to him? Well, how else? We had a lot of really attractive advertising representatives. We had one that was really his type, you know, really big-bosomed woman. And she was game. She's happy to do it. So she grabbed a copy of The Onion, worked her way through all the security guards, bodyguards, like, right this way, right this way. And she got a photo of him holding up a copy of The Onion. And we, of course, we ran it in the next issue and made up some story about how he was, endorsing The Onion or something. I'm off on a tangent. Which side are we on? We're on your side. Go ahead.
I was hoping you could talk about the amicus brief before the Supreme Court. And this is not a story from The Onion. This actually happened, that you filed an amicus brief. In Ohio, in Parma, Ohio, there was a man who was arrested for making fun of the police on Facebook. And you filed an amicus brief on his behalf. And I want to thank you for that, because that is heroic work, and I want you to talk about it.
Thank you for the question. Thank you. So I am not with The Onion anymore. I left a few years ago, so I did not write that. The person who wrote it was The Onion's current head writer, Mike Gillis, and he did a beautiful job. It was so well written. It was so funny, and it didn't work. The Supreme Court did not side with The Onion on the issue. But I totally agree. It was a beautiful piece of writing. It was a great stance to make.
What's so good about it was that it deconstructed. It gave you like a parody, and then it said, oh, well, buckle up, readers, we're going to show you how this works and all this. And it's deconstructing how parody works, and it's a masterpiece, and I think everyone in the audience should read it.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and it shows you just how much things have changed with social media and with the ability of fake news and propaganda to influence public opinion. Because one of the Supreme Court cases that we really relied on at The Onion for so many years was the People versus Larry Flynt, which was from the 70s, when Larry Flynt made fun of Jerry Falwell. And he did a fake ad with a picture of Jerry Falwell, claiming that Jerry Falwell, had sex with his mother in an outhouse and stuff like this. And Jerry Falwell, the famous TV preacher, head of the moral majority, sued and went all the way to Supreme Court. And they made a movie about it with Woody Harrelson playing Larry Flynt. Highly recommend it. Great movie. Milos Forman. Norm Macdonald is in the movie. Anyway, 9-0. When have you last seen a 9-0 Supreme Court decision in favor of Larry Flynt? Saying, hey, Jerry Falwell is a public figure. You can make fun of him all day. It's freedom of the press. I don't have any faith that the Supreme Court would vote that way today. The fact that they didn't even side with that Onion brief, it's pretty scary, pretty scary. Yes?
Hi, Scott. Thank you for a great opening. And my
pleasure.
question is, what is the fundamental difference between propaganda and fake news with influence of people? Thank you.
Difference between propaganda and fake news. So for a while, they were calling propaganda fake news because people in Russia or who knows where were writing fake stories, and they were printing them, or not printing them, running them on US-based social media and trying to affect public opinion. And they called that fake news. And before that, so The Onion never called what it did fake news, because in fact, The Onion never really did fake news. The Onion made up stories. It wasn't even based on real news at all. It was just totally made up stuff. Because for a long time, we had like a 2-week lead time for stories. Come up with the idea, 2 weeks later it would run. So we almost never actually responded to news that was happening by doing like our take on it. Everybody thought that's what we were doing, but we were just making up stuff from whole cloth. When The Daily Show started, or rather, when The Daily Show was taken over by Jon Stewart, they started calling it the fake news. And side note, Jon Stewart hired my right-hand man from The Onion, Ben Carlin, to be his showrunner, executive producer, because he saw how Ben had helped make The Onion into this like real news parody that was really believable, and that's what he wanted for The Daily Show. And so they started using the term fake news in their marketing. And so when the propaganda started coming out, this was around in the 2016 election, people just borrowed that term, and they called it fake news. But it's really a misnomer, like it can be both ways. Some propaganda is fake news. Other propaganda is not news-based at all. And some fake news is not propaganda. It's just meant to be funny news parody. Thank you for that. Hello. Oh, there's nobody up there. We've exhausted your questions, people. Nobody has anything more to say.
Perfect timing.
And right on time.
So,
Thank you very much.
Scott, do you have any last words for us?
Any last words? What? Sorry, I can't understand. You're not at the mic, so I have no idea what you're saying.
That's okay.
The acoustics in here are too good. I just want to say thanks again for coming. Follow me on social media. If you Google me, Scott Dikkers, even if you spell it wrong. Google can find me. And I do a daily creativity tips and motivation and inspiration on Substack, free daily tips. Anybody want to sign up for that, you're welcome. And I'm going to be doing a panel tomorrow at noon. I welcome you to all join in for that and invite your friends. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Conference on World Affairs. Thank you very much.
So, thank you for joining us and for the Molly Ivins Memorial Tribute recipient, Scott Dikkers. All right, thanks so much.